Okay, welcome everyone to Community Governance Oversight meeting number 4. I hope everyone had a pleasant Easter break and is now ready to dig into more governance subjects. Welcome Livia, who's here to observe and take notes, and here's Tivo, just on time. So he's going to come, and then let's wait for Tivo to join. Hi Tivo, we're just starting the meeting. Okay, so I'll go into sharing the screen. Hold on a sec. Get my computer right.
What about Joe? Is she?
Joe's got family commitments, long-term family commitments at the moment, so she won't be able to make meetings at present. So, but we, okay, well, thanks everyone for coming, and if we can just dive straight in. The first item on the agenda is from our friends in Treasury, Andre and Miroslav. If you could just provide any updates.
Payments in this group. We will start working out the payments before IOG releases the next installment. So on the day that they release, we'll do as much payments as we can. So we'll start working out who needs to get paid what. I think that's it from us.
I think the only we're not going to pay for deliverables and retrospectively, but perhaps at a future meeting we may need to talk about that. I think the only immediate payment will be for Livia for going forward, Andre. So if we meet tomorrow and discuss that, but yeah, we're going to try and time the budgeting ahead so that we're making budgeting decisions ahead of fund release. That's what you're saying, Andre, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, if we can move on to if there's any updates or questions about budget issues. Okay, we'll move on to town hall slides. Alison, would you like to give an update on town hall slides?
Sure. So I incorporated the feedback I heard at our last meeting, or tried to anyway, into the slides for last night. So I appreciate any commentary or feedback or thoughts anyone has that I can use for next time around. And I should be more specific. The specific thing that I incorporated was that someone had mentioned, I think maybe Vanessa, that people didn't know where the group had come from. So that was the reason behind the history and the origin of the group slide. But yeah, any other thoughts of what I should or shouldn't be saying?
I think going forward, I think at the beginning of the slides, it would be probably good to repeat that, but just to say, this is who we are in 2 sentences, just so that people who have seen it for the first time know who we are. But apart from that, I think it's great.
Makes sense.
I think you were super clear, and I mean, I'm biased obviously because I'm here and I understand what's going on. It seemed super clear and well presented. So
yeah, I thought it was great.
Thank you.
Okay, if we move on to the next item, which is the fund date proposal. The fund date proposal is now out of the VCA stage. I think voting starts today. Is that right? I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay, so the only action on this really is for people to, if they can, to promote our proposal. This will fund us and with an increased budget going forward. So if you've seen the opportunities to mention it or discuss it or draw attention to it, that'd be appreciated. Is there any questions, updates, or suggestions on the fund date proposal? Okay.
I do have a question. Do we have a Twitter account, or are you using?
I'm using QA DAO to promote stuff that I work on, but anyone's welcome to retweet or tweet from their own account as they see what's appropriate. So I think
I'll happily.
Sorry, go on. I think there's a lag.
I'll happily tweet about it, or I was just wondering if you were going to tweet, and then I'd just be lazy and retweet.
Yeah, I mean, if you tweet, I could retweet, or it's that kind of thing. Just be tag people in and just draw attention to it. I mean, it's got quite good. I think it's quite well rated, isn't it, Vanessa? I'm not sure the proposal.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's doing all right.
So it's just to bring it to people's attention, so it gets kind of some traction in voting. But so hopefully we'll get funded and move forward with iteration 2 of CGO.
Can I just ask quickly, do you think it's out of order to mention it in the next town hall slides, the proposal? Because voting will still be open then, won't it?
It will.
Yeah, well, I did mention it last night, so I hope nobody
Sorry, I
thinks
missed it. I'm so sorry.
Maybe I said it too quickly at the end, but the last slide had both the Fund 7 proposal and the Fund 8 proposal.
Oh, right, I only heard Fund 7, sorry.
But you could.
No,
you
that's
could,
all right. Clearly, I didn't promote it enough.
You could dwell on it, Alison. But I suppose the question is that appropriate? Yeah, given that we're given a slot in town hall, I don't know. What do people think? Should we use that slot?
I think yes. I mean, town hall is about promoting the governance, which is the projects of the project. So it is, town halls are available to all funded proposals. So they and obviously during a presentation they can offer their future projects. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing that too.
Any other views?
Maybe what I could do is mention that we have a proposal, and if anybody has any questions about the community governance oversight connected to the proposal, they can contact us or something to that extent.
Yeah, great.
And share the proposal link in the chat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'll just quickly do a project board review to see where we are. This might take. Okay. So I won't spend much time on this. So we have input today into the IOG newsletter, which we're going to do at the end of the meeting. We're going to do a summary of what we discussed today, which Danny is going to put in the weekly newsletter and go out. We have to do Fund 7 reporting on the 24th, which I think is Sunday. I can prepare that and we can do that asynchronously. I can post what I'm going to report in Discord, if that everyone's okay with that. In progress at the moment is this meeting and our Fund 8 proposal, which we've just been discussing, and the 4 deliverables, which we're just going to move on to now. They're now in progress and AGA is due for them. What's been done is the town hall slides. So Alison's just done that. So this is how this works. This is what we're tracking. Kenrick, I need you to accept invites before I can assign anything to you, but everyone else is here.
Oh, okay. I did.
Yeah.
I must have it in my email. And
yeah. It means I can just assign you here and we can track tasks. That's all. If anyone wants to open up any one of these, I'm also keeping just updates in any of these, very high level updates of what people are doing, not any detail. It's just so that we can track who's going to get paid what at the end of the Fund 7 proposal. Okay, moving back, and now we're on to the main part of the meeting, the scope on deliverables. And if we start with challenge setting, and the actions from the previous meeting were for Phil to feed back to Ro of AdaGov. Do you want to speak to that, Phil?
Yeah, I've been talking to him about his implementations and things like that. He works full time and is in Australia, so it's very unlikely he's going to be able to make any meetings to do any presentation or something. But he did do the town hall presentation pretty much the day before, I think we had the last meeting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, on that, I mean, it's probably out of scope, but maybe we'll talk about it after the initial meeting.
Yeah,
So-
we can stop recording and have an informal discussion.
Yeah, I'll talk about that later.
I don't think it's off topic because it's community governance, and I think AdaGov is trying to bring community together to use one place where to store data and have an access to this.
I think the details, I'd rather, like, it's going to take a little while to
Yeah.
go into the details of it. So
I think what
the conversation's been had, and I'm in total support of his data structures that he's looking to implement. So it's about how we can help him. I've had a conversation with Joey from the Circle. He's the tool builder rep in the Circle. Thanks, Alison, for putting me on to him. So I'm kind of representing, I haven't fully organized this with Rory yet, but I'm going to try and represent the AdaGov solution in the community. So
I mean, Tivo, I suppose how it relates to scope and deliverables is that it's how this might inform what surveys we do for and what retrospectives we do in relation to the review of challenge setting. So as I understand it, Phil Rowe's doing some work on that. So we want to learn lessons from each other. So, but I think Phil's right. We maybe have a more detailed discussion afterwards about that. Okay, the other actions moving on was, and I haven't done this, or Alison, have you spoken to George about consolidating challenges into smaller categories, the work that George is doing?
No, I not only haven't I, but I'm remiss that I didn't realize this was my action item.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's good feedback.
Which,
So I probably should be a bit more forthcoming about action items then, if they have to think about that. Okay.
well, and I also dropped off early last meeting because
Yeah.
Matthias reminded me that I needed to pick my son up from school, which was nearly a disaster.
Yeah. I mean, George is in Discord, so if we tag him in on that, we could have a discussion, maybe.
Yeah, and this was my idea originally, and I guess I'm just trying to remember that the point of this action item is that we want to understand what he's doing to see how it relates to our governance oversight activities around challenge teams. Is that an accurate summary?
Yeah, although I would say that, and I don't want to be too pedantic about the scope, but our scope is oversight of challenge setting, although challenge setting obviously relates to challenge teams. So George is obviously looking to, in the long term or medium term, to replace challenge settings with his solution. So it's more, I suppose, how that informs that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Well,
so,
I could take the action to tag him in Discord and ask him to give us a brief update.
I appreciate that, because I let it slip as well. So I know, you know, so it's probably, because we're all very busy, it's probably best to kind of get that done asynchronously in Discord. So I appreciate that. That'd be good. Okay, moving on to the next major deliverable, it's Catalyst Circle problem sensing. And the action from the previous meeting was to do joint working parties with Catalyst Circle v3 on the problems process. And that's Alison, myself, and Tivo. I can do a quick summary, and we had 2 working meetings so far. The first meeting sought to clarify the problem sensing process. There's some more details there. And then we had a meeting this week on Tuesday to develop that further with a problem sensing rubric and how to design a workflow for reviewing a problem at a circle meeting. So that feeds into our overview of the effectiveness of problem sensing. Would anyone have any feedback or any comments on this?
I will comment that today we had in a CAVC hub a T-work introduction workshop showing how process works, and I saw Nadia's the same process in the works where community suggestion was taken. He answered these questions, and so what I'm trying to say is that it's already getting like in the like use cases of in the CA and DCA hub to see if this process, what we are working on, helps.
And that process particularly is breaking down into the rubric, Thibaut, the kind of 3 parts. Is that what you mean?
Yes, these 3 main questions and the flow of.
Yeah. Okay. And that they are relevant to the Cardano mission and some kind of problem statement, like what's the current state of where we are, where we're going, and then the final part of the rubric is some kind of qualitative or quantitative metric, and that's the kind of minimum for a problem to go onto the Circle board. I mean, Vanessa, you were commenting on this in Discord or something related to this.
Oh yeah, I just made a really comment in the Discord section where you're talking about it, just saying that digging into the documentation of Circle meetings kind of reveals some quite interesting things about how the process has worked and how it's operated in the past. So that's just maybe something, maybe not for now, but maybe for the final report or for the retrospective part of our work. So yeah, just that's all I was saying.
You're also focusing on shifts of emphasis between different iterations of Circle. And do you want to speak to that a bit more?
I think it's just really notable that, sorry, all I was going to say, I think it's just really noticeable in the last Circle meeting, V3, where they suddenly did this massive pivot and really focused hugely on the prioritized problems board. And it seemed to have an effect on how the process operated. So I suppose I'm just saying that how far the Circle meetings focus on the board seems to have an influence on how well the process works. And it's just a consideration. You can have the theory about how it's supposed to work, but if it doesn't happen in the meeting, it doesn't happen. That's the main point.
And I suppose picking up on what Thibaut was saying, and you're observing the DREP stuff in CAs, I suppose what's coming to the fore here is how different subcircles or communities are feeding back into their reps. So rather what we should be seeing is problems coming from the community more, that reflecting the community more.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if I can just really quickly say on that, I think it's also about the different communities and the different seats on Circle, how organized they are, because I noticed a difference between how organized the CA circle is and how organized other seats on the Circle's sub-circles are.
Right.
So CAs are getting stuff through that process because they're really organized and they have a sense of themselves as a community. Whereas, say, for instance, I'm not sure that funded proposers.
Oh, you got cut off.
We lost you there, I think.
Can you just repeat the
Sorry,
end?
Yeah, CAs have a sense of themselves as a community, whereas, for example, I'm not sure that funded proposers have that sense of themselves as a community, and I'm not sure how well organized they are. So maybe their issues are not coming through in a structured way, I guess.
Last cohort meeting, Mercy did share a presentation to onboard and to coordinate these funded proposals. So I think, yes, it takes time to find these people.
Yeah.
I wonder how did Allison or he even found any kind of followers when he created these podcast events, or not podcasts, but yeah, like community calls to ask questions. Because yeah, I think there is the label itself has a different, like, the grasp of who are you going to work for, and I think all roles cannot be so organized as CAs.
Yeah, I think the main point from this, Thibaut, is that it's going to give us, this can give us information that we can oversee to put in our final report, so we can report on. I mean, that's quite interesting that different subcircles or different communities seem to be operating in different ways, and that's something that might be of interest to people from a governance perspective. Cameron.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think the process that Nadia put together is a very good model that maybe others in the circle and different parts of the Catalyst leadership could use as a model. I'm going to try to remember this from the top of my head, but it's in her slides from last week, where she kind of described a process of identifying an issue, putting a sub-circle around that issue, selecting a champion that's going to kind of drive the issue, and then, you know, kind of a closeout report on, you know, what came out of the work on that issue. And I think what was very helpful, I like the idea of setting up these subcircles where they're kind of focused on a particular issue rather than kind of another standing committee that works under the circle member. That seems much more focused and much more oriented towards clear actions and outcomes.
I suppose from an oversight perspective, then one of the things that might interest us is that way of working transferable to other subcircles, Kenrick?
Exactly. That's why I'm mentioning it.
Yeah. So, and is it appropriate for a way of working for different approaches, like for example, staple operators, or which have different communities and may have different ways of operating? Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Alice and I discussed this when we were working on how to reach the inverted commas voters when we were making a Fund 7 proposal about this. It because they're not involved necessarily with Catalyst.
Yeah.
Right. Both. I mean, there's the voters that know about it and choose to participate, and then there's this whole other world of voters that exists that don't even know Catalyst or have zero interest in Catalyst, but are ADA holders, so they're technically available for voters. But it's a different community group, I guess, that the CAs are the engaged community. So it from the circle members' point of view, it's easier to get them activated. Alison might have something to say about that, how she actually engaged with voters.
I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think we're probably getting a bit off topic, but I would just say that in spite of the thinking about it, I did not do a very good job of reaching voters broadly. I mean, I started doing some work with the open office hours, but I mostly got people who are already engaged in Catalyst. And the initiative that I wish I had gotten farther with was to find other places where Cardano community members and therefore voters or potential voters engage outside of Catalyst, and Reddit was my only idea, but I didn't manage to make any traction there.
Yeah, picking up on that Reddit thing, I noticed that, I mean, maybe we need to do that as a footnote, that Danny, from his summary of the survey at Town Hall, went through the different social media. What was the success of each social media channel, you know, and he compared them from the survey, which I found very interesting. Like he compared Reddit with Telegram, with Twitter and all that kind of thing. And I was surprised actually that the weekly newsletter was quite successful. But
I was surprised too.
Yeah,
I wondered if this.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, the survey was publicized in the weekly newsletter. That would be a bit.
Oh, it'd be a self-fulfilling. Yeah, okay, sure. I suppose. I mean, we should move on, but I just want to say that it is kind of relevant because how each circle rep represents their community is answerable now to how they report to their funding in circle. So there's from an oversight perspective, from what we do, that is in our remit. So in a sense, in terms of how effective they're handling the problem sensing. So that's that's really what our interest. But we should probably move on to DREPs, because there's before we get on to what a main action item from last week on DREPs, do you have any updates, Kenrick, that you'd like to give on DREPs?
Yeah, sure. So I've sent out invitations to about 10 people, and maybe about 4 or 5 have accepted that, to be part of the Zotair literature database. Now, I wanted to clarify also, just maybe with a show of hands on the reaction button, if anyone wants to be included in that Zotair group. And just to clarify again, the Zotera is a literature database that you can use for bibliography tools. And the first step, we're going to do a literature search, and assuming we get funded under Fund 8, that will lead into putting together a white paper on governance and the issues around the DREPs. So I'll add you, Steve, then to a meeting I've set up for next week to discuss it. Yeah, so if anyone needs help, if you want to be included, but you're not sure how to use the Zotair or accept the invitation, give me kind of a raised hand right now. Either just wave or, and let me make sure I can see everyone actually before I suggest that. Hold on a second.
I've got all these buttons open, so I can't figure out how to raise my hand.
Yeah. Anyone who wants to be part of that group, want to raise their hand right now, and I'll send you an email. Okay. Very good. And so my plan is to hold a first group meeting next week to discuss the tool and our plans for how to use the tool. And the only other update I'll do is part of what I'm going to discuss with that group is sort of how to kind of may open this more to the community, but I kind of want to figure out a strategy for doing that. So it's like, as I look to the white paper, it would be nice for that to be a community document, except somehow I'm not sure, or at least I haven't done it this way, to write. Typically research is done by sort of a few people that are very focused on hard problems. So I'm wondering what the right model is in terms of opening this up to the community more, but at the same time, making it kind of some kind of qualification based as to what their contribution would be as as a co-author.
So an action coming out of this is to, at your meeting, we meet together and we're trying to help. We're trying to figure that out. That approach, Cameron.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, yeah. I'm certainly I think I'm interested in that whole kind of peer research, kind of thing. Is that possible? Do we need to have a much more of a focus from one or two individuals, that kind of thing? I would like to. I just haven't found time to play with Zotero. I want to interface it with Obsidian, but I haven't found time to do that. So hopefully I will in the next week or so. But I certainly prioritize that meeting. Okay,
and I did send you an invitation, so you can look in your email for it, Steve.
Yeah,
if you haven't seen it already.
Yeah, I will go. I think I had a quick look at the Zotero database or the filter that you sent me. So I will look at that, and I'll try and figure out how to integrate it with other stuff. The main action item on DREPs from last week was, and what we would was to discuss this week the letter from IOG, and if I just open it up here. I'm not sure if anyone had an opportunity to reflect on this anymore, but we did decide 2 weeks ago to return to this and to, so if we thought what kind of response it was, if we had any thoughts on it. So I'll just open up that to everyone. Not to put you on the spot.
Can you send the link again? I'd like to open up quick.
Yeah, sure. I'll put it in chat if I can.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I'm happy to kick off my response to the feedback. I appreciate very much that it seems like IOG took some time to read the community's letter, reflect on it, and put together, you know, a decently sized message and response. That said, I didn't think it contained a lot of specificity other than to say they took the concerns seriously, and it will become apparent how they're responding in the course of the workshops. So to me, it's more of we're still in a wait and see pattern to how the project or the experiment will actually roll out once it gets going.
I think it's not by chance that they call this the Catalyst, Project Catalyst, the experiment, right? The experimental stage of Voltaire, because they understand that they don't have the answers and they want to engage and get community participation, but not everything's ready. And I think that was clear yesterday in the after town hall with the I can't remember the names, but the two IOG
Kevin Hammond.
Kevin and Jared.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on that IOGs as a company is doing, and as the stewards of the process, and they have a lot more information that they hold, as they pointed out last night, but it's not possible due to various aspects of what they're working on that are not yet finished. And I think that's why they just can't. We all want it now, but it can't, from their point of view, it can't be now because it's not ready, and it's open to attack in that way if they did release things publicly that weren't ready.
Right. Okay, Vanessa.
What I get from the letter is kind of in the 1, 2, 3rd paragraph, the key thing, this is the thing it seems to pivot around, is that the point of DREPs is to increase the validity of Project Catalyst by increasing voter participation and reducing voter apathy. That is what they seem to be saying is the key thing. Yeah, thank you for highlighting. So I think from our perspective, presuming we get funded to work on it by the time it's implemented, that's what I would like to know, how they plan to monitor that as IOG. And also I think in the longer term, we need to think about, you know, how we would have oversight of whether that happens or not. But that's like what I get from the letter. You know, there's kind of like quite a lot of stuff around it that just kind of sets the tone and all that. But that to me is the core of what they're saying, is that is what DREPs are for, which I wasn't 100% sure that was their main motivation until I read that. So that's kind of what I get from the letter.
Okay, Kenrick.
Yeah, and then building on what Vanessa's saying, I think this is one of the big open questions is, to what extent does the passive voter who selects a delegated rep improve the governance? You know, because, and is that, and like, for instance, a measure that says, like, we used to have, say 800 people participating, and now we have 8,000 people participating, but, you know, 7,009, 200 of those are these passive voters who aren't necessarily very active in the governance. There has to be some way of measuring that.
But it reduces the choice, right? Instead of choosing from 1,000 proposals, you're choosing from 50 DREPs, right? So
right, maybe that's a good way to measure it. Actually, is like that's a great suggestion, Philip. And you know, in information theory, there's these concepts of like you kind of measure information by how many choices you have versus what the outcome is, and that, you know, that movement from many choices to one outcome is a measure of how much information was processed.
I mean, picking up, just before we move on to Matthias, picking up on your point, Kenrick, on being informed. If you recall the blockchain governance paper from February, there's a choice not to be informed as well. So,
Yeah.
which is written into that paper. I just want to put that as a footnote so we can go back to that at another time to check that. So if you're doing some oversight metrics on DREPs, you're right, you would want to see how the DREPs, what differences the DREPs making to the quality, perhaps, maybe that's the wrong word, of decision making on assessments, as opposed to people who choose not to be informed, and to use the parlance, and that whether there's any qualitative or quantitative difference between those two approaches. Matthias?
Yeah, the way I see DREPs right now, and I share Kenrick's concerns, or so at my company we're now 14 people, and a few of us are very involved in Catalyst, but the majority are not. And the question today that I posted in our company Discord was, would it be helpful for you to, get a voting list, essentially, right? And just internally. And the anonymous answer was yes, absolutely, because, but now it's a delegation of trust, because, it's just to increase voting power, essentially, if we play that further, right? Instead of us coming up with some sort of voting list and tell essentially our people, it's like, okay, this is what we think you should vote on. Now it is even more hands off with DREPs, right? I'm just delegating my voting power. I'm not informed at all, right? I'll just trust you that you do the right thing. So the legitimacy part, I'm not too sure about it. I still think it's a good idea, but the question really is, does it improve governance, or
Yeah. I suppose we have to be clear about what we mean by these terms of legitimacy as well, and what the DREP is for. Is it for domain knowledge, or is it for some kind of representation? Tivo?
I support Matthias in basically the same thing, but just clarifying where I come from. When I read this paper, I didn't quite get what they answered, because the original paper asked a bunch of questions: how do they operate, how they are showed, and all of these questions were just not answered. And now we are in the situation where, again, IOG has content. They are waiting to publish in a correct time. Community has already questions, probably what they might have answer for, but they don't give us answers because we are not ready for it, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah.
They're not ready for it, I think.
Yeah. Can I just respond to that? Before they put this letter out, we didn't know that Kevin Hammond and his colleague were going to do an update on Treasury yesterday, which has partly answered the original letter, partly because there was a request in the original letter to clarify Treasury, wasn't there, Tivo? And also, but you're right, a lot of the specific questions weren't answered, and there's statements like in the letter, the solutions presented in your letter align well, which ones? So it's a kind of a vagueness. It's not just they're not ready, Phil. It's like, it does feel like they're holding something back. It's like, and they're not responding to specific questions.
They are definitely holding a lot back. They're holding their cards tight, which is true.
Yeah, Vanessa. Go on, Vanessa. Sorry.
No, I'm sure there are reasons why they're holding some things back. But for me, one of the key things that is raised here is almost like an equal opportunities issue, or a representation issue. In most organizations, if you don't tell people that you're recruiting what criteria you're recruiting them on, then it really limits who's going to participate, because if people don't understand what they're being asked for, then they can't apply fairly. So I just feel that, sorry, I can hear an echo. Can anyone else hear it?
Sorry, that was me. I've muted now.
Sorry. Okay. No, I just find it really distracting when that happens. Sorry, more than it should. Yeah. yeah, so yeah, the equal opportunities issue of not telling people on what basis you're recruiting them, how can they possibly then make a fair application, especially if they're already marginalized and they don't feel confident that they're saying the right things or doing the right things. So I feel that while there may be things that IOG have to keep close to their chest until they're ready to explain them, I think recruiting DREPs as they're doing now without saying what they'll be paid and saying what the recruitment criteria actually are, I think is really questionable, and it concerns me.
I'd say they wouldn't know how much they're getting paid at this point. That's what I'd suggest. But anyway, I can't say for sure. DREPs is their experimentation with liquid democracy. Is this correct? Is this what people understand?
Yes.
Yeah, and I have questions about those words. That's actually what I've focused on as what I'm hoping the literature review and the potential white paper would try to clarify is what is meant by this phrase liquid democracy, and how would you measure each of these concepts? What does it mean to be liquid? What does it mean to be a democracy? And are we just using those words because they sound attractive, or is there aspects of the design that really fulfill that aspiration?
Absolutely.
Because there's many, and the reason I'm highlighted on that is that in terms of the first year Catalyst, there's many things that are truly decentralized and quite new and original, but there's a lot of things that aren't decentralized and in fact are quite centralized in the way decisions are being made. So I'd like to sort of be able to quantify that.
Yeah, absolutely. To wrap up on this, then I suppose the way it is relevant to what we do, as Kenrick just said, we're looking at the kind of, I suppose, the theoretical basis of this. So from a liquid democracy perspective, to see, as Kenrick puts, expressed well there, how theory meets with practice. And the second part of what we're doing is like what we're reviewing in this letter. There's more oversight as business as usual, like what happens, how are they releasing stuff, how are they communicating stuff, and that's also so there's two parts to that. Even though we may not be very well resourced for that, that's what we are doing here. So thanks everyone for those contributions. If we get back now, sorry. Yeah,
I'll just quickly mention, I guess there's a survey point or process in there for us to ask the community how they feel about IO's decision-making process and ability to communicate with the community their plans and things. So there's a potential possibility in there to pursue that, maybe not now, maybe in the next iteration of this group, but yeah, something we can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, I mean, we have questions about how to survey, we need to address those. But yes, there's certainly going to be an opportunity here to get people's feedback at different stages of the implementation of DREPs, or even at the communication of DREPs. So if we move on to, so we're getting on a bit now to governance parameters. Okay, again, we haven't, the action from the last meeting, we had a discussion last meeting then where we've said governance parameters is closed down because Harris put it on hold. But then we said, well, no, it's not on hold because we can still talk about governance parameters. And that resulted in an action which we haven't done, TiVo, I don't think, have we, where we were supposed to meet and work on what is a parameter change, what is a parameter, and who decides that. So perhaps we should schedule a meeting this week or to work on that. What do you think, TiVo? You're mute.
This week, no, but yes, next week we can definitely schedule that.
Okay. Right, I'll schedule that. The other action was to document and capture what the community is saying about parameter changes in general. And Vanessa was to do that in an informal way.
Yeah, I've just been frantically noting as much as I see. I haven't got it into any kind of shape yet that people can look at and say if they're okay with it being documented. Some of it has actually come from Twitter as well as Telegram, and I think Twitter feels like a much more public forum, so I don't think there are any issues there. But certainly with Telegram, particularly in more closed groups that are Catalyst specific, I think if it was going to go public, we just have to ask people if they're okay with that. So I'm going to get it into shape so that people can actually see what's there and then do that. But yeah, I'm also going to continue to monitor like anything that I see that seems to be governance related. Most of it seems to be in the CA's channel, but if anybody sees anything, then just let me know and I'll add it in.
Is that going to be sourced in any particular document, Vanessa, or is it going to be reported back to the next meeting?
I was just saying, that I'm going to try and pull it together, and then when people have given their consent or otherwise, then yeah.
Okay, thanks. I think we've already, okay, that's the end of the governance deliverables. I think we've already discussed the Fund 7 reporting, which we're going to do offline in Discord for the 24th on Sunday. Any other businesses, if anyone, as usual, if anyone can digest what happened in this meeting today and post 1 or 2 sentence suggestions to how to summarize it in Daniel's weekly newsletter, just post that in one of the governance oversight Discord channels, and then I can edit those together and they can go in the weekly newsletter. Matthias.
Yeah, any other business? So I'm sharing right now a Google form on principles of governance. This came out from the Gimba Labs working group on a Cardano constitution. And in this first step, we just want to collect, so I'm part of this working group now as well. We collect insights, what is important to just, be a part of the constitution, charter, manifesto, whatever you want to call it. Is it going to be in a document form, written word? We're not sure, but we're essentially collecting feedback right now. So I encourage you to fill out that form as well and distribute it as well, because that group is very much concerned with a constitution that would be coming from IOG top down. And so the intent is to come together as a community, the various communities within Cardano, and come up with a shared document of principles, values, etc. So sharing that.
Kenrick, you have your hand up on that.
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to another thought on what I said about this idea of contrasting decentralized and centralized governance is also just how we measure the effectiveness of governance, because some things, like we have an aspiration for decentralized, but decentralized doesn't fulfill everything that needs to get done in a governance setting. So also, just as part of our research and thoughts is, good ways to measure the effectiveness of decision-making and governance.
Yeah.
And I think that builds on like what Matthias is saying in the work he's doing with regard to making a constitution, is that that's sort of a way maybe and an opportunity to kind of define what good outcomes would be. Yeah,
I mean, also it's great that before I move on to Alison, I think it's great that if I can just assume that you're the liaison on this, Matthias, you know, because, you know, a representing community governance oversight on that, because it's given bandwidth, it's hard to be aware of everything that's going on in the ecosystem. And obviously this is very important to actually, so we don't duplicate work and that we're aware of what each others are doing. Alison.
So Phil referenced this briefly, but I actually, as I think about it, the discussion from the town hall yesterday and also the after town hall around the governance of the Cardano Treasury could be quite important to be included in what we're doing here. So question number one is that in scope? And then question number two would be, if so, to what extent do we want to include that material in what we're documenting?
Yeah.
Does that come under the parameters? Is the Treasury part of a parameter of Catalyst?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think.
I would say absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
B. It could fall under parameters.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
it
that's
could,
how I
yeah.
see it.
I think because I mean, that's how you change the allocation of funds in Treasury model. So yeah, I don't see, I think that's acceptable. Can I just say on the constitution term, and also the coming up with general principles, I would push back. Well, coming from an Anglo-Saxon tradition, I have to push back on this. Sorry, because I don't think there should be universal principles or a constitution. That's my view. But I don't want to get into that here because, you know, I know there's an American and French tradition of constitutionalism. But I just want to point that out, that is an American and French tradition. It's not a European or an Anglo-Saxon tradition necessarily.
I really want to second that. And I was just going to ask, has it been decided already that there is going to be a constitution, or is it up for debate?
It is up for debate, and so constitution, we acknowledge that is also a word that might be triggering. And Joe actually also did a presentation, I mean, with her work on the Cardano Women Group. She was talking about where she resides now, right? New Zealand does not also have a constitution, right? There are some principles and there's a, but she's also part of the group as well. So it's a quite interesting dynamic. I think the bottom line is, and I agree, the terms are important. But what we want to essentially establish, and this is my take on it, I shared it with the group as well, and I didn't get much pushback, but essentially declare how do we communicate with each other, or how do we treat each other, right? It is more about principles, values. Maybe a manifesto would be more appropriate, but again, that word is also triggering for especially many Americans because they're thinking communism. And so yeah, it's up for debate, but the bottom line is that we'd rather as a community have something ready before IOG pushes something down our throat and we'll just, you know, make a checkbox and say, yeah, we agree to whatever IOG
Just
says.
for clarity though, I don't think it's necessarily the word that people are resisting. It's the idea of a single document. Say, like from an English perspective, we kind of do have a constitution, but it's spread throughout lots of different, and the same is true in New Zealand. So it's the decentralizedness rather than the actual word you call it.
That's right. It undermines the principle of decentralization to have a single definition of governance by a body. If IOG decides to define that, they are working against centralization, not for decentralization. So again, this is a debate. I don't want to get into a big debate here. There's a kind of libertarian perspectives on this. Joe's perspectives were coming from Eleanor Ostrom, I think the Commons approach, which is a process of discovery, okay, of discovering what people's democratic or representational needs are, rather than defining what they are. So a universalist approach versus a discovery approach, or a so. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into that. But this is what is at stake, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And just to clarify, we also did talk about that. Is there a single source of truth? And we made the assumption that no, probably not. Right. And so we have the meeting that happened yesterday recorded as well. Right now it's on Gimbal Labs. And what is it? Token-based learning project, which is now public, that Constitution channel. Maybe I should link that.
You have a link to that?
Notes.
Yeah,
I'll find that and put it in the notes.
And as a footnote, this is, even though we may disagree, this is great stuff. You know, because this helps us think about, you know, how we should deal with these issues, how we should document them, how we should represent people's views. So thank you a lot for that, Matthias' input. Okay, we're now into override. Go on, Thibaut, yeah.
I'm not that highly sure is this related, but this innovation fund architecture, Miro board, I feel like the working group has been established in the CAVCA hub, and we had last session, in the last one session and upcoming one sessions. I'm going to have a breakout room to run a workshop to collectively then run through these perspectives and map out activities and relation to other roles, and also competencies for the role in each of these stages. Also created a survey form to kind of start tracking how people feel about the meetings. Do they get the word in? Do they feel like they are listened? And also if they are okay with the progress we are doing. So another thing to see how why I think this is related to governance is that in every Thursday there is another meetup group in the VC hub channel where we have hub calls, where we discuss like how we are going to proceed with these research, what we learned, this like weekly retrospective basically, and also improving the board itself. So the governance of that is because the research in the end will be used to kind of find related parameters for the innovation fund or the project catalyst.
Could you, if you've got access to this document we're seeing on the screenshot, I put a heading here and the link to the Miro board. Could you put a sentence about your breakout room and your survey underneath as well? It's just so that I think this could be interesting for any other
Can
business.
you drop the
link to this? Let me just see.
I didn't open it. Or maybe I opened, but I closed it.
Sure, I'll put it in. I'm trying to find my chat. No, I can't find my chat. If someone could drop that in chat, because I seem to. Oh, here we go. I've just. It disappears when after a while, doesn't it? Okay, there you go. Okay, there's the document. Because what's interesting from this, any other business, it's kind of highlighting that there's other work going on in the ecosystem on governance. So it's good to be, you know, as I say, be aware of that and to see who's doing what. So the work you're doing on the Innovation Fund architecture, Tivo, and the work the Gimbal Labs are doing on the Constitution is like critical in this. I think we need to be aware of everything. Yeah. Okay, we're slightly over time, but I think that's it. And we're now into feedback mode. And if anyone has any feedback on this meeting or how it could be run differently, or if any improvements.
I just continue to really admire your organizational skills, Stephen. You make it very easy and clear to participate in this group. So thank you for that. I'm taking you as my inspiration for when I have to do something similar.
Okay, thank you for that. Any critical comments or constructive criticism or negative criticism or just plain insults? No, I guess. Okay.
Well, I'll work on that as an action item, but right now I'm just going to amplify Allison's comments.
Okay,
appreciate
thanks.
it.
Thanks, Kevin. The next meeting is going to be at 1500 UTC. That's UTC on the 5th of May. And thank you everyone for participating. I'm just going to stop the squirt and we're going to now stop the recording.